"You're just a servant," the Duke said, until she inherited the entire estate. What would you do if the man who humiliated you every day suddenly discovered that everything he owned now belonged to you? Before we begin, tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone treated like they were invisible, only for everyone to regret it later? And if you enjoy stories about revenge, hidden strength, inheritance battles, and powerful endings, subscribe now, because this story will leave you questioning how well people really know the ones they look down on. For 7 years, Eleanor Reed walked through the halls of Blackthorne Manor without anyone truly seeing her. She woke before sunrise. She polished silver that would never touch her lips. She prepared meals she would never sit down to enjoy. She washed mud from boots worth more than her yearly salary. And every morning, like clockwork, she heard the same voice. Cold, sharp, dismissive. "You missed a spot. Move faster. Stop standing around. You're just a servant." The voice belonged to Duke Nathaniel Blackthorne, one of the wealthiest landowners in the kingdom, a man whose name opened doors, a man whose money bought loyalty, and a man who never once bothered to learn Eleanor's birthday, or her favorite color, or the fact that she had spent nearly every penny she earned helping her younger brother attend university after their parents died. To him, she wasn't Eleanor, she was staff, a pair of hands, a shadow moving through his house, nothing more. At least, that's what he thought. The irony was that everyone in Blackthorne Manor depended on Eleanor. The cooks relied on her. The gardeners trusted her. The elderly house steward often joked that if Eleanor took a single day off, the entire estate would collapse by noon. And he wasn't entirely wrong, because while the Duke spent his days managing investments and attending elite gatherings, Eleanor quietly solved problems before anyone else noticed them. When pipes burst during winter, she organized repairs. When supplies went missing, she found them. When workers argued, she settled disputes. When guests arrived unexpectedly, she somehow made everything run smoothly. She never asked for recognition, never demanded praise. She simply did the work, day after day, year after year, and nobody noticed, at least not publicly. But there was one person who paid attention. Lady Margaret Blackthorne, the Duke's grandmother, 84 years old, sharp-minded, observant, and far wiser than anyone gave her credit for. Unlike her grandson, Margaret watched people carefully. She noticed who spoke kindly when no one was looking, who helped others without expecting rewards, who remained honest when dishonesty would have been easier. And over 7 years, she watched Eleanor, every single day. One rainy afternoon, Margaret sat by a library window while Eleanor arranged fresh flowers nearby. "Eleanor?" "Yes, my lady?" Margaret smiled gently. "When was the last time someone asked how you were doing?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. She blinked, actually thinking about it. Then she laughed softly. "I honestly can't remember." Margaret's expression changed, not with pity, with disappointment. Not in Eleanor, in everyone else, including her own family. That day became the beginning of an unlikely friendship. Whenever Eleanor finished her duties, Margaret invited her for tea. Sometimes they talked about books, sometimes history, sometimes nothing important at all. For the first time in years, someone saw Eleanor as a person, not a servant, not staff, a person. And that mattered more than anyone realized, especially during the months that followed, because Lady Margaret's health began to decline, slowly at first, then faster. The doctors visited more often. The family visited less. Funny how that happens. When Margaret hosted lavish dinners, relatives filled every room. But when illness arrived, excuses arrived too. Business meetings, travel plans, important obligations. One by one, they disappeared, except Eleanor. She was there every day, helping Margaret walk through the gardens, reading aloud when her eyesight weakened, listening when loneliness became heavier than illness. And Margaret noticed. She noticed everything. One evening, while rain tapped softly against the windows, Margaret asked a question that would change both their lives. "If you could have anything, Eleanor, what would you want?" Eleanor smiled. The answer came immediately. Enough security to stop worrying. Margaret looked surprised. Not wealth? No. Power? No. Status? Eleanor shook her head. "I've spent my life around people chasing those things." She paused. "They never seem happy." Margaret stared at her for several seconds. Then she smiled. The kind of smile that appears when someone finally finds proof of something they've always believed. 3 weeks later, Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep. The news spread across the region by morning. Within hours, relatives who hadn't visited for months suddenly returned. Cars lined the estate driveway. Lawyers arrived. Executives arrived. Distant cousins appeared from nowhere. Everyone came for the same reason. The inheritance. Nobody said it aloud, but everyone thought it. Margaret had been extraordinarily wealthy. Her personal assets alone were worth millions. Her investments stretched across multiple counties, and whoever inherited her holdings would become one of the most powerful figures in the region overnight. Naturally, everyone assumed the Duke would inherit everything, including the Duke himself. After all, he was family. Who else could it be? The funeral passed quietly. Then came the reading of the will. The entire Blackthorne family gathered inside the grand drawing room. Tension hung in the air. People smiled at each other while secretly calculating future fortunes. The family attorney stood beside a polished oak table. A thick envelope rested in his hands. Duke Nathaniel sat confidently near the front. His sister Victoria looked equally certain. Several cousins whispered among themselves. And standing near the back wall was Eleanor. She wasn't there as family. She wasn't there as a beneficiary. She was there to serve refreshments. Or so everyone assumed. The attorney cleared his throat. The room fell silent. Then he began reading. Several charitable donations. Various gifts to longtime friends. Specific amounts allocated to staff members. Nothing unusual, nothing shocking. Until the final section, the attorney stopped, adjusted his glasses, and looked directly toward Eleanor. A strange feeling moved through the room. People exchanged confused glances. Why was he looking at her? The attorney unfolded the final page. Then read the words that changed everything. "I leave Blackthorne Manor, all attached lands, all investment holdings, and the remainder of my estate." He paused. The room held its breath. "To Eleanor Reed." Silence. Complete silence. For 1 second, 2 seconds. 3, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. It was as if the entire room had forgotten how. Then a glass slipped from someone's hand. It shattered against the floor, and chaos erupted. "What? That's impossible. There must be a mistake." Nathaniel shot to his feet. His face had gone completely pale. "Eleanor?" For the first time in 7 years, the Duke actually looked at her. Not through her, not past her, at her. And the expression on his face wasn't annoyance. It wasn't superiority. It wasn't contempt. It was shock. Because the servant he had dismissed every day now owned everything, including the house he was standing in. And Eleanor herself looked just as stunned as everyone else. Because she had never known. Not until this moment. Not until every eye in the room turned toward her. Not until the Duke realized that the woman he called just a servant had become the most powerful person in Blackthorne Manor. And what happened next would make the inheritance look like the easy part. The silence lasted only a few seconds, and then the room exploded. "That's absurd. There has to be another page. Check it again. She's a servant." The words flew across the room like arrows. Not one person questioned whether Lady Margaret had been of sound mind. Not one person asked why she might have made that decision. Their first reaction was simpler. Eleanor didn't belong, and people have a habit of revealing who they truly are the moment money enters the conversation. The attorney raised his hand. The will has been verified multiple times. Nathaniel stepped forward. His voice was controlled, but barely. My grandmother would never leave everything to an employee. The attorney met his gaze. She did. She was manipulated. No evidence suggests that. Then someone forged it. The document was witnessed by 3 independent parties. Every answer only made the room more furious, because facts are inconvenient when they stand in the way of entitlement. Meanwhile, Eleanor stood frozen. Her mind couldn't process what was happening. Blackthorne Manor, the land, the investments, the businesses. She had spent 7 years dusting furniture in rooms she couldn't imagine owning. Now people were saying it all belonged to her. It felt impossible. And yet the documents sitting on the table said otherwise. The attorney looked toward her. Miss Reed. Lady Margaret also left a personal letter. The room instantly quieted. Eleanor accepted the envelope with trembling hands. The handwriting was unmistakable. Margaret's. She slowly unfolded the paper and began reading. My dear Eleanor, if you're reading this, then I've finally won our last argument. You always insisted that kindness should be its own reward. I disagreed. The world takes too much from good people and gives too little back. For 7 years, I watched this family. And for 7 years, I watched you. When others saw status, I watched character. When others valued bloodlines, I valued integrity. You never asked for anything. You never expected recognition. You cared for me when those with my last name found excuses not to. This estate was built by generations of people, but its future belongs to the person who understands responsibility, not privilege. I believe that person is you. Do not let them convince you otherwise. With love, Margaret. By the time Eleanor finished reading, her eyes were wet. But around her, the family looked furious. Because Margaret had done something they never expected. She had explained herself, and her reasoning made perfect sense, which made it even harder to challenge. Nathaniel said nothing, but his jaw tightened. For the first time in his life, someone had chosen merit over his family name. And it happened publicly. The legal challenges started 3 days later. Exactly as Margaret predicted, lawyers arrived. Lawsuits appeared. Documents were filed. Relatives who barely spoke to one another suddenly united around a common mission: take everything back. The local newspapers quickly picked up the story. Within weeks, the entire region was talking about it. People loved the narrative. A servant inheriting a fortune. An aristocratic family fighting to reclaim it. It sounded like fiction. Except it wasn't, and something unexpected began happening. Public opinion shifted toward Eleanor. Because ordinary people recognized the story immediately. Most had worked under someone who looked down on them. Most had experienced being underestimated. Most knew what it felt like to be invisible. The details were unique. The emotions were universal. And that made Eleanor impossible to ignore. One morning, Eleanor entered a cafe near town. Conversation stopped. She instantly felt uncomfortable. A woman approached her, middle-aged, factory worker's uniform. Nervous smile. Miss Reed? Eleanor nodded. The woman laughed softly. I just wanted to say something. What is it? The woman looked emotional. When? Eleanor blinked. What? When? The woman smiled. For every person who's ever been told they weren't important enough. Then she walked away. Eleanor never even learned her name. But she never forgot the moment. Because for the first time, she realized the story wasn't just about money anymore. People were seeing themselves in it. Meanwhile, Nathaniel Blackthorne was having a very different experience. For years, people agreed with him, respected him, admired him, or at least pretended to. Now, something had changed. Questions followed him everywhere. Why hadn't he visited Margaret more often? Why did Margaret trust Eleanor instead? What had Eleanor done that the family hadn't? The questions irritated him, then frustrated him, then eventually forced him to confront something uncomfortable. Because every answer led to the same conclusion. Eleanor had earned Margaret's trust. He hadn't, and no lawsuit could erase that reality. Weeks turned into months. The legal battle intensified.
Can we take a second and talk about something? The reason stories like this hit so hard isn't because of the money. It's because, as almost everyone has experienced, being overlooked, underestimated, or treated like they didn't matter. So, if you've ever proven someone wrong, drop a comment below and tell me your story. And make sure you're subscribed, because what happens next completely changes the Duke's life forever.
Yet every investigation reached the same outcome. Margaret had acted freely, knowingly, deliberately. The inheritance was valid. The family was losing, slowly, painfully, but losing nonetheless. Then came the discovery nobody expected. A box, locked, hidden among Margaret's private records. Inside were journals spanning nearly 15 years. The contents stunned everyone, especially Nathaniel, because Margaret had documented everything. Observations, thoughts, concerns, family interactions, and hundreds of entries mentioning Eleanor. One journal entry stopped Nathaniel cold. He read it 3 times, then a 4th. Unable to believe what he was seeing. The entry was dated 4 years earlier. Margaret wrote, "Nathaniel reminds me too much of his grandfather." Both men mistake authority for leadership. Eleanor possesses something neither fully understands: the ability to make people feel valued. If Blackthorne Manor survives the next generation, it will be because of people like her, not people like us. Nathaniel closed the journal. The words hit harder than any courtroom defeat, because they came from someone who loved him, someone who had spent his entire life believing in him, and yet she had seen flaws he never bothered to confront. That night, Nathaniel couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he walked through the estate alone. No staff, no meetings, no distractions, just silence. As he moved through the halls, memories surfaced. Eleanor carrying boxes during storms. Eleanor helping elderly workers. Eleanor fixing problems before they escalated. Eleanor working late after everyone else had gone home. He remembered countless moments he'd never considered important, because he never considered her important. The realization landed like a punch to the chest. The problem wasn't that Margaret chose Eleanor. The problem was that he never understood why. Until now. The next morning brought another surprise. The attorney requested a private meeting. Only Eleanor and Nathaniel. Nothing else. No relatives, no lawyers, no spectators, just them. The meeting took place in Margaret's old library. The attorney placed a sealed folder on the desk. "There is one final instruction from Lady Margaret." Both stared at him. "What instruction?" The attorney slid the folder forward. "She ordered that this remain confidential until after the inheritance challenge began." Nathaniel frowned. "What's inside?" The attorney hesitated. Even he seemed affected. Then he answered, "A family secret." The room became still. Eleanor exchanged a glance with Nathaniel. Neither spoke. The attorney continued, "Lady Margaret believed this information would change how both of you viewed the estate." Nathaniel slowly opened the folder. His eyes scanned the first page, then widened. He looked at Eleanor, then back at the document, then at Eleanor again. The color drained from his face. Eleanor felt her stomach tighten. "What is it?" Nathaniel couldn't answer. For perhaps the first time in his life, the Duke was speechless. The attorney finally spoke. And what he revealed next would not only change Eleanor's future, it would rewrite the history of the Blackthorne family itself. Because Eleanor Reed wasn't connected to Blackthorne Manor by chance. She never had been. And the truth hidden inside that folder was about to shake the entire estate to its foundations. The room felt smaller, heavier, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Nathaniel stared at the folder. Eleanor stared at Nathaniel, and the attorney stood silently beside the desk. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Eleanor finally broke the silence. "What is it?" Nathaniel looked at her. The confidence that had defined him his entire life was gone, replaced by something she had never seen before. Shock, real shock. The attorney took a slow breath, then he spoke. "Lady Margaret instructed me to explain." He opened another document, carefully. "As you know, Eleanor, your parents died when you were young." Eleanor nodded. Pain flickered across her face. Some wounds never completely heal, no matter how many years pass. The attorney continued. "What you do not know is that your mother once worked for the Blackthorne family." Eleanor frowned. "My mother mentioned that years ago." "She told you she was employed here?" "Yes." The attorney nodded. That was true. Then he paused. But it wasn't the entire truth. A chill moved through the room. The attorney looked directly at Eleanor. "Your mother wasn't merely an employee." He swallowed. "She was Margaret's goddaughter." Silence. Eleanor blinked. Once, twice, certain she had misunderstood. "My mother knew Lady Margaret." "Knew her?" The attorney said softly. "Margaret helped raise her." The words landed like thunder. Eleanor sat down, slowly, because suddenly her legs didn't feel strong enough to hold her. The attorney continued. "Your grandmother worked for the Blackthorne family decades ago. Margaret and your grandmother became extremely close. After your grandmother passed away, Margaret took a personal interest in your mother's future." Eleanor's heart raced. Why had she never known any of this? The answer came moments later. After your mother married, she moved away. The families lost regular contact, but Margaret never forgot her. He opened another letter. After your parents died, Margaret spent years trying to locate you and your brother. Eleanor felt tears forming. Years. Margaret had spent years searching. The attorney nodded, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. When she finally discovered you had become an employee at Blackthorne Manor. He smiled sadly. She never told you who she was. Why? The answer came from a handwritten note. Margaret's words. One final message. The attorney read aloud. "If Eleanor discovers our connection, she may feel obligated to treat me differently. I want to know who she truly is, not who she becomes because of me. Character only reveals itself when nobody is watching." The room became quiet again, because suddenly everything made sense. The tea conversations, the friendship, the trust. Margaret hadn't been testing Eleanor. She had been learning about her, and what she learned had convinced her of one thing. That character mattered more than inheritance. Nathaniel sat motionless, processing everything. Then the attorney handed him another journal. "This section was addressed specifically to you." Nathaniel hesitated before opening it. Inside was one final entry, written just weeks before Margaret's death. He began reading. "My dear Nathaniel, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And if Eleanor has inherited the estate, you are probably angry, perhaps even humiliated. But I hope one day you understand. This decision was never made to punish you. It was made to teach you. You were born into privilege. Eleanor was not. Yet throughout her life, she consistently displayed qualities leadership requires. Patience, responsibility, compassion, humility. You possess many strengths, but these are the ones you neglected. The world already has enough rulers. It desperately needs more leaders. I hope this experience helps you become one." Nathaniel lowered the journal. His eyes remained fixed on the final sentence. For most of his life, nobody had challenged him. People either feared him, needed him, or benefited from him. Margaret had done something different. She had held up a mirror and forced him to look. The legal war ended 3 months later. The final ruling was decisive. The inheritance stood. No further appeals, no additional challenges, no loopholes, no escape routes. Blackthorne Manor officially belonged to Eleanor Reed. The decision made headlines across the region. Many celebrated, others complained. But the outcome remained unchanged. The servant had become the owner. The woman nobody noticed had become impossible to ignore. And yet the biggest surprise came afterward, because power reveals character. Just as Margaret always believed, people expected Eleanor to seek revenge. They expected mass firings, public humiliation, a dramatic settling of scores. After everything she endured, many felt she had earned it. Instead, she did something nobody predicted. On her first day as owner, every employee received an invitation. Housekeepers, gardeners, kitchen staff, maintenance workers. Everyone. The gathering took place in the Grand Hall, the same hall where Eleanor had spent years serving others. Now she stood at the front, looking out at hundreds of nervous faces. Some wondered if jobs would be cut. Others feared major changes. Eleanor smiled, then spoke. "When I first arrived here, I was terrified." A few people laughed softly. They remembered. "I worried about making mistakes." She paused. "I worried about losing my position." Another pause. "But more than anything," she looked around the room, "I worried nobody would ever see me." The room became still, because everyone understood exactly what she meant. Some had lived it themselves. Eleanor continued. "That ends today." She announced wage increases, better benefits, education grants, emergency assistance programs, retirement protections, training opportunities, policies ensuring every employee could speak directly with management. No endless bureaucracy, no fear, no silence. By the time she finished, many employees were crying, not because of the money, because someone finally understood their lives. Someone who had stood where they stood, someone who remembered. The changes transformed Blackthorne Manor. Turnover dropped dramatically. Productivity improved. Businesses connected to the estate became more profitable, not less. Within 2 years, revenues increased significantly. Experts were surprised. Employees weren't. People tend to work harder when they're treated like human beings. It's a lesson many organizations still struggle to learn, but Eleanor never forgot it, because she had lived the alternative. As for Nathaniel, his journey proved more complicated. Respect isn't rebuilt overnight, neither is trust. For months he kept his distance, focusing on the businesses he still managed separately. Watching, learning, reflecting. Then one afternoon he approached Eleanor in the gardens, the same gardens where she and Margaret once walked together. Eleanor noticed him immediately. "Your Grace." Nathaniel winced, almost embarrassed by the title. "You don't have to call me that." A small smile appeared on her face. "Old habits." He nodded. "Fair enough." For a moment neither spoke. Then Nathaniel did something nobody expected, something he had never done before. He apologized. Not with excuses, not with qualifications, not with explanations. A real apology. "I was wrong." The words came quietly, but they carried weight. "I spent years looking past people." His voice tightened. "Especially you." Eleanor studied him carefully, searching for insincerity, finding none. Nathaniel continued. "I thought status meant value." A bitter laugh escaped him. "Margaret spent years trying to teach me otherwise." He looked toward the manor. I guess she finally succeeded. For the first time, Eleanor saw not a duke, not a powerful landowner, not a man raised above criticism, just a human being trying to become better than he had been yesterday. And sometimes that's enough. Not to erase the past, but to build a future. 5 years later, visitors arriving at Blackthorne Manor noticed something unusual. Employees smiled. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. People spoke proudly about where they worked. Communities around the estate flourished. Scholarship recipients graduated from universities. Families purchased homes. Workers built better lives. The impact spread far beyond the manor's gates. And in Margaret's old library, one framed photograph sat on a shelf. Lady Margaret, smiling, watching over the room she once loved. Beneath it rested a small plaque, a quote Eleanor chose herself. A quote inspired by everything Margaret had taught her. It read, "Character is revealed by how you treat people who can do nothing for you." Visitors often stopped to read it. Some nodded. Others barely noticed. But Eleanor always smiled when she passed by, because she knew something many powerful people never learn. Titles fade. Money changes hands. Status comes and goes. A character? Character echoes long after everything else disappears. And in the end, that was the true inheritance. Not the estate, not the fortune, not the land, the lesson. The lesson that a servant can become an owner, that kindness can outlive power, and that the people we overlook today may be the very people who shape tomorrow. So before you judge someone by their position, before you assume someone's worth based on their title, remember Eleanor Reed, the servant nobody respected, the leader everyone eventually followed, and the woman who proved that the strongest people in the room are often the ones nobody notices at first. If this story moved you, comment below. Character matters. And tell us, have you ever seen someone underestimated, only to surprise everyone? Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories of resilience, justice, and unexpected triumph. Because sometimes the people the world ignores are the ones destined to change it.
What makes this story unforgettable isn't that Eleanor inherited an estate. It's that she never became the kind of person who hurt her. That's real strength. So, if you believe character matters more than success, comment character matters below. And if you enjoy powerful stories about justice, resilience, and unexpected triumphs, subscribe and join us for the next story. You won't want to miss what's coming next.